Welcome into the vault. We got a special episode on deck for you. It is Thursday, June 15th. I'm Bobby Trossett alongside my co-host, Sarah Ellison. And partner, we've been trying to track this guy down for a little over 2 months or so. We got to rewind back to April when our guest was on the Pat McAfee show, something that he's hosted before. He's jack of all trades these days. It's NFL Network's Ian Rapoport. And before we get into the conversation, let's revisit back in April when your tweet went viral enough to make it on Pat's show during Ian's segment. And in order to do that, we've clipped it. So without further ado, here it is, and then we'll bring Ian on the other side.
So there's a person, what's her name? Sarah Ellison on the Twitters.
Shout out, Sarah.
Who actually kind of broke it down based on it's SG Ellison is if you want to look. I believe her breakdown comparing the two deals is accurate. If you want to throw it up here at some point.
Yeah, it's on it right now.
I do believe the Ravens will probably adjust and use this to help get Lamar done. But the deal they offered him was pretty strong. I mean, look at those numbers, right? So total value
$200 million. Lamar Jackson's total guarantee was $200 million. We know that.
I believe that includes a kicker that would have kicked it in year 2, but obviously you're not going to cut him after 1 year. So I believe that is essentially the total guarantee.
Really? I don't think we've ever heard.
No, that was the discussion we had between the virtual and the actual guaranteed, and that's what we were saying.
Yeah, but it was like 100.
Yeah. It was like a $65 million difference between what was actually guaranteed and then what the number they were saying.
I don't know. It was $200 million was the guaranteed. Now it feels like we've gotten a lot wrong. The Ravens have offered Lamar Jackson $200 million guaranteed.
Okay, so you get the point. Being that I bumped into Ian at Preakness last month, I thought the least that I could do is introduce the two of you. So without further ado, welcome into the vault, Ian.
That was pretty funny.
Nice to meet you, Ian. Yeah.
Yeah, no, great to meet you. That was man, it's fun. It's funny. It's like obviously that was just, really a couple weeks ago, but it seems like ages ago. I mean, the fact that we're talking now, Lamar's done. All the contract drama of comparing one deal to another and what did the Ravens offer and what did they not offer him and why was he not taking it? I mean, that is – and, of course, what did end up happening was they did use that Jalen Hurts deal to bump up their offer and really made Lamar Jackson an offer he couldn't refuse and got a deal done. So that all played out. But, yeah, that's amazing. That was just a couple of weeks ago.
It does. It feels like a lifetime ago. What's funny is, I work from home. And my daughter was turning 6, and she's like, "Mom, let's turn off your phone for 1 hour. We gotta plan my birthday party tomorrow." And so I'm like, "All right, let's turn it off." And just as I'm about to, my phone starts blowing up, and I'm like, and so my daughter, I was like, "Can we watch this really quick?" She's like, "Okay." And she's like, "Mommy, he doesn't know who you are. Why doesn't he know who you are?" So it was such a funny.
I do
funny
now,
time
though.
for sure. Yeah, we do now. Well, Ian, I mean, that took forever, the process between the two. But was there ever, from what you had been hearing from behind the scenes, was there ever a real chance that Lamar could have gone somewhere else?
No, I never got the sense he could go somewhere else. And, he was seemingly open to it. I mean, his trade request, and obviously his trade request, which dropped around the time of the owners meeting in March, it was theoretically a trade request, but the way it was explained to me was, if you're not going to pay me, then trade me. And that was, to me, very different because I knew how badly, Eric DeCosta, John Harbaugh, the Ravens, I knew how badly they wanted to pay him. And I knew the different ways they had tried to do it. Long-term deal, short-term deal, fully guaranteed deal. I mean, all sorts of different ways. And so to me, it was a trade request, but it kind of really wasn't. And there was a chance someone would sign him to an offer sheet, but not really. So, I never had any doubt he would be playing for the Ravens this year. I did have doubts that they'd be able to get a deal done. And, kudos to all involved that they actually did.
Shifting gears to J.K. Dobbins, I'm sure we'll circle back to Lamar at some point in the conversation. But, a couple weeks removed from the cryptic tweets about his uncertain future. We know that he's going into a contract year, the final year of his rookie deal. And as we tape this on Thursday, the 15th, he really didn't do a lot at mandatory minicamp this week. And Harbs, just within the last hour or so, kind of seemed a little standoffish about when asked about J.K. and why he didn't participate. Could the Ravens be dealing with a hold-in situation for 2023 terms?
Yeah, I mean that is what it sounds like. I don't know for 100% sure, but usually when a player shows up, doesn't practice, the coaching staff is like, he's fine, and he's going into a contract year. Usually that means, well, I'd like a deal, but I don't have one, so therefore I'm not gonna participate. To me, like these are all fine. Like these are all, they don't really hurt anyone. There's really not a lot bad happens. If he doesn't get practice, but it's June, so like he'll have plenty of time to practice in July and August. Plus, this is his fourth year in the system, so I'm not worried about it. Or actually, fourth year with the Ravens, first year in the system, but I'm still not worried about it. He's got plenty of time. Clearly wants a new deal. Will they give him one? I don't know. But clearly wants one. And yeah, I think hold in is probably the right term here.
Yeah, in this type of situation where you see a player do this, I mean, this is especially at the running back position where, we see Dalvin Cook getting cut and you got all these veterans still sitting out there. What kind of leverage is he really garnering by holding in? Like maybe if you're like a superstar quarterback, I could see that putting pressure on the team. But what kind of leverage? I mean, I'm all here for JK to get his money and get his bag and all that kind of stuff. You never want to see a player get hurt without having that financial security. He's already been hurt before, but does this really earn him much leverage?
I don't think it earns him much leverage, but it does do something, right? Like what it basically does is tell the team, I'm not that happy and I want a new contract, which, you could say with words, but actions, now the coaching staff is aware and I think had to practice without him. So they clearly know something is going on. And it prevents him from getting injured in a way that would put his future in doubt. I mean, to me, it's not really like about the leverage of, okay, well, now they're going to do a deal. A deal is going to be whatever it's going to be. The market is what it is. And I don't think it's like, well, because he sat out, we're going to offer him more. But it does deliver a very clear and loud message that, J.K. Dobbins probably wants to get paid.
I think Sarah and I, we've discussed in the last few weeks, maybe even months of off season, that cornerback and the depth or lack thereof in Baltimore is certainly a need. I don't know if it's pressing, but based on past years, it could be pressing because of how much they've been decimated at the position. Marcus Peters seems to be garnering some attention from Vegas. Do you get the sense that something's imminent there from a signing standpoint?
I don't get the sense something is imminent, and I don't really know that there's any imminent signings now because, we're basically right at the beginning of summer. And, could he sign before camp? Yeah, possibly could, sure. And the Raiders would make some sense. To me, it feels like if he was going to be on the Ravens, would probably be on the Ravens, right? Like Rock Ya-Sin gets signed, that's probably Marcus Peters' money, is my guess. So, I think that ship has probably sailed. The hard thing is, you're right about the injuries and the lack of, depth of the position, everything they've dealt with in the past. You have no idea if that's going to repeat itself. You want to be prepared, obviously, but you truly don't know if that's going to come back. I mean, so, you want to spend money and be okay, but you also don't know if you're going to end up wasting it because maybe the position this year will be totally fine.
Do you get any sense, and I'm definitely asking this on behalf of Ravens fans, because I know that, Ozzie Newsome has always said, Eric DeCosta repeats it, that you can never have enough depth at cornerback. They have Rock Ya-Sin and Marlon Humphrey, but then after that, it's a whole lot of potential that hasn't been realized. You don't know what's going to happen. Do you get any sense at all that the Ravens are checking in on the veteran cornerback market if it's not Marcus Peters?
I mean, honestly, there's not a lot out there. So right now, I'd say probably not. What you probably will get, and the Ravens do this, every year. Like you'll get to, let's say, mid-August, late August, and they'll either say like, all right, some of these draft picks we signed are ready to contribute, or they're not. And then if they're not, well, then you look around the league and you'll say like, who do we like that maybe is on the bubble for someone else? You might pull a trade. There's definitely things you can do. I mean, Eric DeCosta probably does as good a job as anyone of figuring out who's not going to make other teams and who, might make your team and going to get those type of guys. So I'm sure they will always be looking.
Yeah. So let's
We'd be
Sorry, Bobby. I was just thinking. I just skipped over this question here, and it is changing directions here. But this DeAndre Hopkins to Baltimore thing will not die. It just keeps coming back, even though he's visiting other teams. I know he's been with New England, or he's been with Tennessee, going to New England. I don't know if he's made it there yet. But there was so much smoke right before the draft that the Ravens could sign DeAndre Hopkins, and then Odell Beckham Jr., he has his first kind of presser since being signed. And he said that before the draft, he and DeAndre were both saying that they wanted to come here, which like reignited all fans being like, oh, bring in DeAndre too. So what's it looking like to you? Is Hopkins going to sign with one of the two teams he's visited? Is there any connection with Baltimore at this point?
I know there was some interest and some discussion, and maybe, I know there were some people around the league, high-level people who thought that, the Ravens were going to sign or wanted to sign Odell and DeAndre Hopkins. He's visited two teams. The Ravens are not one of them. I'm not saying that's not going to happen. I'm just saying, these things are best judged by actions rather than words. So if there was a signing coming with Baltimore, my guess is, the visit would probably be happening or be on the books or something like that. So I don't get that sense. Maybe when he signs somewhere else, then the rumors will finally die. I'm not so sure.
Yeah. I guess speaking of signings, Adrian Amos, who just ended up going with the Jets, kind of what we're believed to know about that is that he was basically plucked. The Jets swooped in at the last minute, and the day prior, Amos was visiting the Ravens. So was that a direct result of Chuck Clark's, what we think is a serious knee injury, or do you have any insight on that?
Yeah, I mean, I do believe that, that's the fear for Chuck Clark. And yeah, I mean, I would say, probably was going to sign with the Ravens. That would have been my guess. That was something I was hearing. I thought was going to end up happening. And then, you get the injury to Chuck Clark, and all of a sudden there's a need. And this is actually why a lot of veterans will wait as long as they possibly can before signing, because you have no idea what's going to come up. And, obviously it really benefited, Adrian Amos to wait, because probably got a little more money than he would have from a team he wasn't expecting, because there was an unexpected need created due to an injury in June.
Yeah, speaking of waiting, it kind of feels like here in Baltimore, there might be like a handshake deal, a wink, wink, nod, nod between the Ravens and Justin Houston, or at least some sort of veteran pass rusher. Do you know, is Justin Houston looking around, or is it kind of, well, once training camp starts, they might land a deal?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think a player of his, veteran status, and he, really knows everything he needs to know. I don't think he's signing before training camp anyway, or maybe, might be a player who signs into training camp. I certainly think that's possible. Baltimore would make sense. I don't know if there's any wink nod deal, but I just know that, again, like a player signing in June really makes no sense. It's not like Justin Houston's like, where's my money going to come from? Like, he's made money. He's done it. He doesn't need mini camp. Like, Baltimore would make some sense, and signing closer to camp would make sense as well.
Yeah. This is Todd Monken from earlier this week. I have a question on the other side of it. Speaking about Odell, of course, they spent, 2019 in Cleveland together.
I was with him in 19. So do I see still a tremendous football player, a guy that can separate and route run and loves to play and brings a certain amount of energy and juice and experience. And then as we practice more together, as we get more together, now we try to fit it together. But he's always going to be crafty. He's always going to be able to find a way to separate. Where that ends up, X, Z, F, that's to be determined. But all that, is just trying to figure out where that fits. And that also with the other pieces, Zay, your tight ends, you brought in Nelson, getting Bate back, and we haven't even had him practice yet. So fitting that all together is really a big part of it, but it's fun to try and figure out how to fit it together. That doesn't always, you don't always have that.
So limited, or active throughout minicamp, but we didn't see a ton of them, right? We've seen the player controlled stuff that he puts out on his social media in terms of workouts and stuff, but the pads haven't come out yet. What's your sense for where he is? He turns 31 this fall. Obviously hasn't played organized live football in a year and a half. What are you thinking?
I think he's gonna be really good. I think he's gonna be really good. And we haven't really seen Odell healthy in quite a long time. I mean, I remember, right before he signed with the Rams when he was a free agent, and the reason teams weren't offering a lot, the reason teams weren't offering long-term deals are they knew his knee was not right. They knew his ACL essentially could re-tear at any moment, and it was a ticking time bomb essentially. He knew it too. Knew his knee was going to tear at some point. It did during the Super Bowl, and obviously took him off the field for a year. It's a very serious injury, but now he's healthy. So, again, I'm not worried about what happens in June. Like, this is all sort of whatever. I do think he's going to end up really good. And I will say this, when it took him a minute or so in LA, probably took him a month to figure it out. Once he figured it out, he was really good. I mean, he was really good. He was on his way to being, I thought the Super Bowl MVP before he tore his knee apart. So whatever fans are expecting, I think that's probably what it's going to be.
So, Ian, we'll get you out of here on this question. Most rosters are set. There'll be some tinkering throughout training camp or whatnot. The AFC is stacked. It's just going to be totally brutal. What's your kind of feel for the AFC? Do you feel like the Ravens have done enough to compete with the Bills and Chiefs of the world? How do you see this conference stacking up?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they should be right there. I mean, Baltimore always has a good team. They always have a lot of talent. They always have, basically everything they need. Now, I don't think the roster building process is done. Could they add a veteran or two? Maybe. Will they trade for a younger player who another team doesn't want? Probably. But I mean, I think they are. Talk about the AFC being stacked. I think they're right there. The only questions they've had was basically surrounding Lamar Jackson, and we don't have those anymore. So, I don't know what questions there are surrounding the Ravens, honestly.
Yeah. Quick programming thing before you dip. I know that Pat's heading to ESPN. There's going to be a simulcast of the show. Is it starting this fall? Is that what they're targeting? Honestly,
I have no idea. I am extremely, extremely happy for Pat. He deserves all of this. He is a madman. I mean, he works like crazy, and he has created just an incredible culture in his show that I think, comes through the internet or whatever, or comes to the room when I'm there in person. He's awesome, and I'm so happy for him and his friends. They've done a great job. As far as the specifics, honestly, I have not even asked.
Yeah. The reason why I'm asking, because I think a lot of folks are wondering, with that shift over to ESPN and your contract with NFL Network, would there be anything conflicting you from going on weekly segments throughout football? Maybe you can't even answer this, but I think a lot of people are wondering.
I have no idea. I have not asked. I will, at some point, all of these answers will come. I mean, he has been quoted, talking about it. He knows a lot more than I do. It's one of those things where sometimes it's best to let it play out. But I'm really, really happy for him and all the success he's had.
Absolutely. We're happy that you came on and you gave us some time here. I know it's sort of the dead of off season, but you don't really have an off season. So we hope that you enjoy the time with you and your family over the next month and a half. And thanks again for coming on the Vault, Ian.
All right. Thank you guys for having me.